You're seeing a live picture of the tribute in light at Ground Zero in New York. Just after 9/11 attacks, there was a national show of unity, but a lot has changed over the past 9 years. A new Rasmussen Reports poll shows 68% of Americans feel our country has changed for the worse since 9/11. Just 11% say it has changed for the better. The mindset of this country is very different than it was in just the last years. Fox's Peter DOOCY reports a Florida pastor and a controversial mosque have created a divide.
A Florida pastor who earned international condemnation with his plans to burn the Koran has announced he will not do so. Terry Jones of the Dove World Outreach Center in Gainesville, Florida, instead wants to meet with Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf about moving a proposed Islamic center and mosque away from Ground Zero.
We have not heard from the Imam, but we are still very, very hopeful that we will meet with him.
The developer of the proposed center says there was no agreement to move the project in exchange for Jones not to burn copies of the Koran on the 9th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Jones has made a series of statements that have sent mixed signals about whether he would follow through with the Koran burning.
I am again clearly speaking. I have requested and pleaded with Pastor to not burn the Quran, and he has agreed in principle.
Meanwhile, thousands of supporters and protesters of the mosque took advantage of the good weather and gathered near Ground Zero for dueling rallies. There was strong support for both sides.
This mosque does not belong in the shadow of the World Trade Center.
As an American citizen, I have the right, freedom of religion, freedom of speech.
Both rallies were very emotional, and a few protesters had to be removed by police, but there were no arrests. In New York, Peter DOOCY, Fox News.
And Fox 29's Carrie Barrett joining us now. Carrie, Governor Ed Rendell took time out today to speak out against the Koran burning in front of the birthplace of American freedom here, right?
He did, Joyce. Yeah, it was a very fitting spot right in front of Independence Hall. It's a building that stands for everything America was founded on: values of tolerance, acceptance, and religious freedom. In front of a crowd of about 100 and with clergy of many different religions and denominations, Governor Rendell said he thought it was important to take time on the anniversary of September 11th to send a message about America's history of freedom. He spoke about the meaning of religious tolerance and how the Trade Center buildings themselves were symbols of acceptance. He spoke specifically about that Florida church's plans to burn the Koran today, saying those actions not only threaten our country's safety, but also the very values that make our country great. In fact, he referenced a service held 2 weeks after those September 11th attacks to remember the Muslims that died in them.
Everyone supported that service. Nobody objected. There was not one word of dissent, because back then we were united. Back then, we weren't Muslims, Jews, Christians. We were Americans. Although Pastor Jones called off the idiotic Koran burning, the damage has already been done. There are already demonstrations and violence in Afghanistan and Egypt.
He went on to say those anti-Muslim feelings and actions at that church are all about hatred. He said they're deeply hurtful not only to Muslims across the world, but also to American citizens as well. And Joyce, he went on to say America's reputation has taken a hit worldwide because of news about that Koran burning, but he hopes that most people will realize the vast majority of Americans do not agree with what that Florida pastor was proposing.
All right, thank you, Carrie Barrett, joining us tonight from the newsroom. A Christian congregation in Tennessee is replacing apprehension with acceptance. When Heartsong church members learned that a mosque was being built next door, they put up a welcome sign for their new Muslim neighbors. Both congregations say they'll continue to build understanding and appreciation for each other's faith. And let's bring in Moen Kawaja of the local chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Thanks for joining us tonight, Moen.
Thank you, Joyce. Thanks for having me.
So it must be encouraging to you to see the understanding going on between that church and mosque in Tennessee.
It's very encouraging, Joyce, and it's also very representative of what America is really about. I have to say, those types of events, such as what we saw outside Independence Hall, those things happen nationwide, and they represent the majority. These Quran burnings, these were fringe extremist groups. They don't represent America.
So what about those verbal clashes in New York City and elsewhere today? That wasn't good.
You know, it shows that we have a long way to go as American Muslims. We have to put the facts out there. The fact is Al-Qaeda attacked us, not Islam, not Muslims. Many American Muslims lost their lives on 9/11 too. We're all Americans, we're all on the same team here. Al-Qaeda attacked us.
Now, we have word today of Qurans being burned, elsewhere today, several places around the country, even though the pastor in Florida called his off. Was it too late to stop a wave that was already in motion?
It's absolutely too late. I'm less concerned about the actual Qurans being burned than the message that's been sent overseas. Al-Qaeda says America is at war with Islam. And just the idea sent that message overseas and helped Al-Qaeda. So I'm very concerned about that.
But you also see it as an opportunity to get your message out, don't you?
Yeah, it is. We have sponsored PSAs, public service announcements, to show that Muslims were also a part of 9/11, focusing on Muslim firefighters. We're sponsoring a Share the Quran event where we plan to send 200,000 Qurans nationwide, and we've encouraged mosques just to open the doors. Outreach, outreach, outreach.
And we want to talk about our Constitution gives Americans the right to burn any book, a flag, or to make unpopular statements, but do American Muslims view these acts any differently from Muslims around the world not governed by our laws or rules?
I think so. As an American Muslim, I did the only thing I could do. I prayed for the pastor. I prayed that God would open his heart and show him the light. And I understand the freedom of speech is absolute. Keep in mind, most of these protests are happening in Afghanistan. They never had a democracy, so they don't understand how absolute the freedom of speech is over here. So they might think that the government is okay with this or all Americans are okay with this, when that is not the case.
And you mentioned the PSAs. What other things are you guys doing in the community to try to combat the anti-Islam sentiment?
We're just doing a 100% grassroots push. We need mosques to open the doors, and they have. When you meet your Muslim neighbor and see who they are, you're less inclined to be fearful of them.
Moen Khawaja, thank you so much, Executive Director of CAIR. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thanks so much.
All right, Moen.